Mabuhay! Welcome back to our channel. This is Daryll. Again, in today's video, we're going to talk about culture shocks that we experience whenever we go to a different country. There are a lot of videos talking about culture shocks experienced by Americans, British, Canadians who come to Spain to teach English and work in general. But then I was thinking, we are lacking some representation here. Although I know that there are some fellow auxiliaries who have been posting videos about their experience here in Madrid as a language assistant, I also want to do my research as well and somehow ask my friends about what are the things that they consider difficult when they started living here. Culture shock, as defined by the Cambridge Dictionary, is the confusion that someone feels whenever he or she visits another country that he or she doesn't know. And many of us experience that. And as a Filipino, as a language assistant who's been living here for 5 years, I've had also some fair share of some culture shocks because I'm just not from here and I have my culture, traditions, and practices that I have been accustomed to before moving here. So here are some of the things that me and my friends experienced when we started living here in Spain in general. The use of spoon and fork. So back in the Philippines, we would always use spoon and fork, and sometimes we just use our hands to eat. So that's what we do. We don't use spoon, fork, plus the knife whenever we eat. And it's something that also I'm not really accustomed to because back home, I would just use spoon and fork. Obviously, I'm just speaking for myself because every family as well is different. No hierarchy in the school system or in the society in general. What do I mean by that? So people don't really call someone ma'am or sir, señor, señora, unless it's really formal. Because even if you are a bit older here, people would still want you to call them by their first name. So they wouldn't require you to call them ma'am or sir, señor or señora. And I think that's one thing that I really appreciate about the culture because it's not so hierarchical. You can just be yourself, be a student, but then you're relatable as well. The teachers can be relatable as well because they use that kind of closeness, I would say. But obviously there are pros and cons in doing that. So whenever you go to a supermarket, you have to bring your own plastic bag or eco bag if you have one because they're not gonna give you one for free. And that's really important to know because some people would say like, oh, so should they give me one now? They're not gonna give you a free plastic bag or an eco bag. You have to bring your own. And if you want to have one, you have to pay, which is like 80 cents, 50 cents. I'm not sure about the price, but it depends on the supermarket. And also, a very important thing that I also noticed is the fact that they don't have what we call bagger in the Philippines, so they don't really put your stuff inside your plastic bag. You have to do it yourself. Public display of affection. I honestly feel that in Spain, they are really expressive when it comes to showing their feelings to their loved ones. So they kiss a lot in the parks, and not just kissing or like embracing someone. Like they really do like French kiss, and that's something that I wasn't really accustomed to. Not that I'm doing that. It's something that Filipinos wouldn't really do because we're still a conservative country. I know that there are a lot of Filipinos also who are liberated, but then, you know, like as a community, you wouldn't really see people doing that in the public. And that's also like a culture shock for me, especially whenever I go to the clubs and bars and it's just normal for them and no one really cares. It's something that I really appreciate because like people are really expressive whenever they want to express their love towards their loved one. Aside from those observations, I also asked some of my friends online on Facebook to give me some of their experiences when it comes to culture shocks here in Spain. One of them mentioned that teenagers have this tendency here in Spain to be really rowdy and disrespectful towards elders, And I see that as not really common in the Philippines because we really respect our teachers. We don't really shout at them. And for someone who came from Asia, whose values and traditions are quite different when it comes to the school setting, that's actually like a culture shock, especially if you're working with teenagers. It's not normal. We don't normally shout at our teachers because they are basically our second parents. And I wouldn't say that every teenager here in Spain is like that, but like, as someone who grew up in the Philippines, who's also been involved in the educational system, it's not common to see those kind of situations. Another observation from my friend is the fact that Spanish people take a bath at night. In the Philippines, it's common to take a bath in the morning because it's really hot and it's a tropical country. And now, at first, when I knew that they were doing that, I was a bit confused because I was thinking, everyone should take a bath in the morning. But now I realized no one really has the time to do that because everyone's rushing to work, and it makes sense to take a bath at night as well because you have the energy, and also and it's not really hot in here, unlike in Asia where it's a bit humid. Another friend of mine told me that one of the culture shocks for her is the timetable when it comes to eating, because here in Spain they eat a little bit late. In the Philippines, we would usually have our breakfast between 5 and 7 or 8 a.m. And then we have our lunch around 12, between 12 and 1 p.m. And have dinner around 6, 7, 8. So after that, we don't really usually eat because it's already nighttime. But also, we also have the concept of merienda, which we got from Spain. And yeah, I think that's the only thing that binds our eating habits. Also, it's normal to see people who are not queuing, especially if you're waiting for the bus. But it just amazes me sometimes when people really know who's the first one, the second, and the third. Because for me, I want to see a line. And most of the time, especially here where I live, I would see like people just like waiting for the bus. They're scattered around. They're not in the line, but then they know who's the first, second, and the third, and that's really amazing. Obviously, it's not just in Spain, but in a lot of countries here in Europe. So the first floor is 0 here. Unlike in the Philippines, the first floor is like the ground floor. And here, you count 0 and then first, second, third, fourth. That's how they do it. Another commentary from a friend of mine, she said that people don't really use umbrella when it's hot. So if you guys don't know, in Asia, we use umbrella not just for the rain, but also for the heat. And it makes sense sometimes because when it's really hot, like you have the tendency to use that, especially if you're not used to the heat of the sun. And I think that's one of the culture shocks as well. Like, we don't really understand sometimes like how Spanish people or Europeans in general could tolerate that heat. And it amazes me every time I see them do that. But I don't know if it applies to everyone. You can comment down below and share your experiences. But she said that a lot of like the people that she dated didn't really like to have labels. And maybe it's cultural as well. I don't know. Comment down below if you think that it is cultural, because in the Philippines, when you are seeing someone, you're dating someone, there's kind of like a label already if it's exclusive or not, or things like that. But here somehow, it's not totally defined. So as a Filipino or a Filipino, you would always have that tendency to be confused about your relationship with the opposite sex. So another culture shock from our friend, she mentioned that she's just shocked by the fact that sometimes, or most of the time, I think oftentimes, like the waiters would just put the bread on top of the table without using anything. Like normally in the Philippines, we don't just put the bread on the table. We put the plate first and put it there. And it's just shocking because I don't know if it's very hygienic in a way, but I know that they wash all of the things that they use beforehand, but it's just different when you do that. Comment down below if you are in favor of just putting the bread on top of the table. Because for me personally, I would put my bread on the plate, or yeah, plato, platito. And the last one would be some like complaints from my friends telling me that some of the Spaniards that they know like really walk so slow, and they tend to like really block the ways whenever they're walking on the street or just everywhere in the metro station. And I'm not sure if it's a Spanish thing, but they tend to block things around. Like they tend to block the ways. So there you have it, guys. Those are some of the commentaries that I got from my friends. I don't know if you agree with some of them, or if you think that's hilarious, you think that it's funny, or you think that it's really true. Comment down below if you've learned something from our video today, and you can also share your experiences when it comes to the topic culture shock that you experienced here in Spain. Muchas gracias a todos y nos vemos para nuestro próximo video. Chao!